All right, welcome to Witchpolice Radio. I'm here with a guest who has not been on the show in a while. I was trying to think back to when the last time you were on the podcast was, and it was one of these remote calls, but it wasn't because of the pandemic. It was because you're just not in Winnipeg, and it was an early attempt, I think, at trying to do one of these long distance calls here. But I think before we even get into any of that, I mean, I do have a lot of questions about your record and everything else you've been doing. But let's start off by you introducing yourself and just give a bit of background about where you are and who you are and what you do as a musician.
Yeah, I'm Nathan Strange, aka the Rainy Day Apparel from Carmen, Manitoba, and yeah, I just make kind of DIY music, and it's kind of vibey and chill, and yeah, just looking to kind of connect to people, whether it's listeners and other musicians through my music.
Cool.
That
And I
basically
guess
be the goal.
yeah, yeah, it's a good goal to have for sure. And I think just to, like, I mean, I know you have a new record that you just put out, and I really do want to talk to you about that. But because you're in Carmen, and because this show is so focused on Winnipeg, just out of necessity, because there's so many artists that are in the city here. What has it been like over the past 2.5 years for you out there? Because I mean, I think I'm intimately familiar with the experience of being during a pandemic and trying to do something creative in Winnipeg. But what was your experience like? Out where you are?
Well, the writing experience and kind of the I guess the live experience were two kind of very different things. I was a board member at Golden Prairie Arts Council, which would kind of be like the encompassing area for Carmen and kind of around there. And like the whole reason I joined the board was to, you know, help put shows on and connect with bands and just kind of have music in our town instead of having to go anywhere. And the board is so good, but it just kind of dried up, and it was kind of tough for me to just kind of be a part of it that way, just because I was like, oh, I just want there to be shows, and there was nothing really live in town. But they worked hard and did some virtual stuff, and whenever stuff opened, we would do outdoor concerts and stuff like that. But
Cool.
aside from that, it since 2019, it's just been pretty dry around here, but it's starting up again, which is nice.
I think that's kind of what it's been like everywhere. Honestly, it's just you never know though, because I mean this has hit certain communities harder than others, and I mean everyone's been affected in some way or another, right? And so, like, I mean, that idea of doing virtual shows and having to kind of come up with alternative solutions to sort of the traditional thing that you do is, I think, something that everyone experienced.
Yeah, everyone was just kind of scrapping and clawing to find a way to make music happen, because I think it just showed how big of a part of our lives the arts are, whether it's music and movies. It was what got us through it all. Or I mean,
Totally.
at least that's how I feel. Yeah.
I agree with you for sure. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, as an artist, what was it like having this kind of enforced time off? I mean, I know you have a day job, I know you do other things, but what was it like, sort of, as someone who is creating and is playing shows, and you're out there and putting yourself out there and getting involved in the community? How did that sort of, silence? I mean, I know there was attempts at doing other things, but what was that like for you? In terms of your creativity and in terms of your, ability to sort of keep yourself actively working as an artist.
Everything kind of slowed down, which is nice to kind of have that, because I feel like I'm kind of always on the go, or at least trying to be. So it was nice to kind of have that time to kind of sit back and be like, okay, just try something new, or just go for it. And I think the biggest challenge was not writing about the elephant in the room, right? You're like, I don't want to write a pandemic song, like,
Yeah,
sort of thing. So I think
yeah.
I think I just drew from past experience, and maybe looking forward, and looking just at maybe possibilities. I guess that's kind of where the title of the EP comes in. Views was just about, like, kind of looking out and kind of seeing what's around me.
With the EP, it was just released a few days ago from when we're recording this. What I mean, I know that things are sort of starting to get back to some sort of normalcy, hopefully, at this point. I mean, shows are starting to happen again. People are touring. Uh, Things are, sort of healing themselves, it seems. What was the kind of what does it feel like to release music now in this time where there's still uncertainty, and when the idea of whether you can play a bunch of shows to promote it seems possible, but you never know what could happen sort of the next week, and things could change. Not to be too much of a
Yeah.
downer, but
Yeah, no kidding. No, but it's definitely realistic to just be cautious. I mean, for me, I just look at the EP as it's been a work in progress up to this point, and it's kind of a snapshot in my life. So I guess if it gets promoted by live shows, great. If it doesn't, I mean, it's just another relic of that of that time that just got kind of frozen there or whatever. But I think yeah, I just go I don't have huge expectations, I guess, but I mean, doing things like this are just that's kind of what it's all about, just connecting with people. And we made it this far to this interview, and if this is the last one, or I guess probably do more virtual ones, but I mean, if this is the last piece of promo that happens for this, I'm happy. It's
Yeah.
just you kind of gotta take the optimistic route. I feel like if you don't do that these days, you're gonna be disappointed.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think so for sure. So, I mean, listening to the record too, listening to the EP, I think one thing about you is you're always putting content online. I mean, you're always putting, acoustic covers and things like that. Sort of, it seems like you always have, as long as I've known of your music, you've been actively kind of putting yourself out there and recording interesting things. And but it's always very much just you and an acoustic guitar. And I think it's easy to forget that the sound that you have can be fleshed out. And so listening to the EP, it's like, oh yeah, right. There's drums and there's keyboards and there's more happening than just this acoustic thing. And I have it so kind of ingrained in my head that you're just this solo folk guy because that's sort of where I see you the most is
Yeah.
online doing these covers. So I mean, is this sound on this EP? How would you define it? I mean, I know it's a annoying question, but I mean, what do you call the sort of the style of music? Because I think it obviously has similarities to the solo acoustic stuff you're doing, but it's much more fleshed out and it's got more depth to it because of just the extra instrumentation.
Yeah, I think the best way to answer it is probably just by throwing back answers that other people have kind of given me, which is I've heard everything from kind of folk to Americana to like like I don't want to say like dream pop, but I think there's elements of that in there too, just with a lot of background ambience and kind of stuff
Sure.
like that. So I mean, I think yeah, I mean I remember one of my favorite bands of all time is Silverchair, and they would always have really weird writing processes, especially kind of on their later albums. And he would bring an idea forward, and it would kind of be like, oh, this doesn't sound anything like us. But then by the time you said like it's fleshed out and everything's in there, you're like, oh yeah, this is what I am. Even though it sounds different than stuff I've done before, I think it always kind of circles back to sounding like me. But I
Yeah.
think I listen to all sorts of stuff, so it always kind of pokes its head in there. All the influences are kind of just put in a blender and thrown back out.
Well, I think Silverchair might be the only band we've ever agreed on. Because
Yeah,
it seems like we're often like,
that's awesome.
when one of us will say something about music online, it'll be just like, oh no. So that's good. It's good. It's good. We have got some common ground there for sure.
I will take that one. Absolutely. That's a win.
Well, I know one of the songs, at least one of the songs from the CP was record. You would released it as a single, kind of well ahead of the album. That was the charity single you did where you were doing a fundraiser.
Yes.
Are these other songs of the same age? Like, had you been working on these songs sort of way back then as well, or are they most of them newer?
Yeah, it's a good question. And thank you, by the way, for being a part of that single as well. That meant so much.
Well, do you
That's
maybe want to explain a bit about
but
that?
yeah,
Just while I have you here talking about it. I mean, is that
yeah.
still? Are you still raising money with that song?
It kind of stopped with the initial kind of surge. I think it's really tough to get people to purchase music online or songs. At least it seems that way. But just the people that supported that cause came out really, really strong and were able to raise. I think it was like it was over $700 just for that song. Which I mean, to me, that's just a huge outpouring of support for one. You know 4-minute track or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it super meaningful to be able to do that. But it was friends of ours lost their daughter and just wanted to put positivity back into the world. So they have like a foundation where they build like buddy benches and playgrounds and stuff like that, and just kind of, making the world a better place in spite of a bad thing happening. And I just thought I kind of wanted to be a part of that. And I don't always know if I have too much to offer, but kind of figured, hey, this is a spot where maybe, just maybe, I can help. And
Yeah,
again, it took other people helping me, like yourself and my friend Jordan, that mixed the song to kind of, to kind of make it happen, because otherwise it wouldn't have. So, I mean, that's, again, it's the whole idea of connection, right? Like, without
totally.
people kind of jumping on board with it, it just never would have, that it never would have got off the ground. Same thing with the EP. It just, with people kind of helping and wanting to be a part of it and collaborating, it just got the bird off the ground.
Well, let me modify my original question then, because I was thinking that while you're saying that, that song, I think that despite being obviously written, at an earlier time, it definitely fits on the
Yeah,
EP. Like it doesn't sound out of place. It sonically it meshes well with the other tracks. So
yeah.
what is sort of the timeline of when these songs were written then? I mean, just because of that, because it doesn't sound out of place. It doesn't sound like it's from something else, and then you did the rest, on their own, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I feel like when I wrote that song, which would have been late 2019, um, I guess it kind of turned a bit of a corner and kind of felt like my writing had changed a bit. Like, I just felt a little more confident with the way I was structuring songs, and I feel like, even though it's the last song on the EP, it probably should be the first, because it's kind of the foot in the door. But yeah, I think um the I put out a single last year at about this time, was Freaking Out. It came
Right,
out
right.
kind of in between as well, and it was probably early mid 2020, and then everything just kind of fell in between. And Skipping Stone would be the last song I wrote, which would have been probably in January, but somewhere between January 2022 to April, maybe
Okay,
somewhere in
okay.
there. So that everything was kind of written and ready to go. And actually, it was slated to kind of be a spring summer release, but Evan, the guy that mixed it and did all the heavy lifting on the songs once they were recorded, his studio flooded.
Oh shit.
The Manitoba strikes again. The weather down in I think they're in Altona or Winkler, but they
Oh yeah.
flooded. And so we couldn't finish the drums, and he couldn't mix, and he had to completely gut and redo his basement. So um, yeah, it was just just sucked for him for sure. So,
Yeah, no doubt.
but he
Yeah.
got it all back together and did it. He was made the project a little longer. Another story to tell.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's like it almost seems like in a year where everything's going, or in a time period where everything's going wrong, there's even more just piling on with extreme weather and everything else. And yeah, it's been a rough one for everyone, I think. But that sounds
Yeah,
particularly hard. Yeah, yeah,
you kind of realize though too, that when people are putting their house back together, or their space, that your song that you want finished doesn't really matter, right? Like, it was nice that he was able to get things back together and do it, but again, just kind of priorities.
yeah. You can
Right?
you can wait. You can wait on the song. Yeah, for sure,
Exactly.
for sure. Does having this out now? Does this? How do you? I mean, assuming everything stays where shows are happening and things like that, is this something you want to perform with a full band? Like, I mean, having heard it on the record now, really fleshed out like that, is that sort of the goal, or are you hoping, or are you gonna do this kind of more of a solo acoustic vibe as you're sort of more frequently seen doing?
Yeah, I would love to. I think there's, the people that worked on the record certainly can play the songs really well. I trust them with it more than I trust myself with it, I think. So to go and do it live with guys like that, I think would be awesome. But I guess the bottom line and the tagline for the Rainy Day Apparel has always been, it's kind of got to work with life, like, it's got to fit. So if it didn't fit for me, or it didn't fit for the others, then it probably wouldn't happen. But I think, the even just trying it once, just working out 5 songs and doing opening for somebody and seeing what that was like, maybe it would, spur on something else. Or
Yeah.
maybe it would be like, nah, this just keep it acoustic or whatever. But
Is it like do the songs work I'm assuming you wrote them on acoustic guitar. Did they work just as well as a solo piece versus the kind of fleshed out studio version, or do you have to do a lot of alteration to make it fit in one form or the other?
Yeah, that's a really I like that question a lot because I do think about that when I play them live. I'm like, this isn't, what the song is anymore. It always starts as the acoustic, whether it's like the chorus, the verse, the
Yeah,
the pieces of it. It always starts that way. But then, as you record it, it becomes something else. And then when you're like, okay, now I have to play these songs for people, it kind of reverts back the other way. But you're like, oh, I added this in or I changed this and I like it better that way now, but I can't really, swing that with just me. So yeah, it's kind of you start here, go there and go back there just to make them work. But I think, I based on what people have said to me after live shows, which I mean, there's always a couple people that say, I really like that. And I
yeah,
guess from my perspective, they probably have never heard the recorded version before, or at least the ones that I played. I played Harvest Moon, and I'm like, these people have never heard these songs before. So, there's not really an expectation to mirror it or match it or
yeah.
even be too true to it.
When you're playing something like that, I mean, you're probably introducing yourself to a lot of people who have never even heard of you before. what what is that like? I mean, how do you sort of people are there to see, they bought tickets because X, Y, and Z is on the bill, but then there you are, and you have this audience that's receptive to what you're doing. I'm assuming. How do you kind of introduce yourself musically to those people, and what is that like? Because it's very different playing, I guess, in your own community when you have people you see every day that know you and know what you're about and know your family and things like that, right? And they're watching you in that context. But when you're playing, especially on a festival where there's tons of people playing, what is that experience like for you as sort of being maybe the new guy on the bill that the people haven't heard before?
I guess I've never really known anything different than that experience.
Sure.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
when I go in there, they're like, "Who the heck is this guy?" But I think I've kind of learned that one of the things I think I'm probably a stronger interview than I am a singer. I mean, I obviously like it, and there are people that it connects with, but I do tell stories in between and just try to again connect with people. And I think if they kind of know what kind of person you are, then like, okay, this guy might have something neat to say through his songs too, sort of thing.
Yeah. And do you feel that your songs? I mean, obviously, like we've said, you have had songs that have touched on serious issues, and like I mean, you did a song that raised all that money. I know it wasn't directly. The song was more, you're not talking about things head on, but you're
Yeah.
you're still dealing with emotions and things like that are relevant to the point there. Do you feel that? I guess what's the best way to? Do you feel your songs are stories, or do you think they're more feelings kind of put into uh, sort of musical form? Like, is it more about sort of the point A to point B in what's happening lyrically, or is it more about the feeling, the overall feeling that you're putting across?
Yeah, I think it's probably like more of a reflection, I think, but not like looking in a straight mirror. You're looking in a pond with a bunch of ripples in it. I think it's probably just kind of, glamorized a bit or kind of, you know, uh depends on how I'm tackling it. The song might be written from a I would have done that different or I really like that or whatever. So yeah, I think of them more as kind of reflections on the people around me or myself or a combination of the two, which then, you're not necessarily just getting me through my songs, but maybe how I'm interpreting somebody else. If
Sure.
that makes sense.
No, it does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you think that living where you do you think that that impacts sort of the tone and the feel of your songs?
I think so. Yeah, I the first track called Towns is about small towns and kind of the inherent problems in them. Just, you know, um I don't know, I kind of picture like the guy in the movie that wears his, old high school jacket and stuff like that and like that kind of idea. I think there's that, but there's so many good people in small towns too that it's that love-hate relationship like oh, no wonder there's a line in the song that's like it's about people just sit around chucking these ideas around and they wonder why their town died, and it's kind of kind of like I don't know, it can seem harsh to it at times, but I think it's kind of like One Great City.
Yeah,
It's a song
yeah.
about hating Winnipeg, but it's also a song about really loving Winnipeg. So I think that's maybe entangled in there a bit.
Well, and I think that I like that idea too, because it sort of goes with the whole thing about Winnipeg. I mean, as a Winnipegger, I have to use that example of people can talk shit about Winnipeg as long as they're from here, right? Like, I mean, if you're not from here and you're saying something negative about the city, everyone gets defensive immediately, and it's like the whole city's about to go fight you. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah,
think it's the same for any community. It's like the people who are of that community and from that community, they can talk about the problems and they can really sort of because they have a unique kind of personal look at what is happening and why it's happening, and someone from the outside seeing it is never going to have the same impact, and it's you're going to miss things and you're not going to get the heart of it. I mean, like One Great City is a great example because it really captures, I think, the heart of Winnipeg, despite seeming to be a negative song about the city, but it really isn't. Like it's a love letter to Winnipeg. It's just
yeah, absolutely.
it just is kind of hidden in this the way people talk about it.
Yeah, and I mean, I moved to Manitoba in 2002 from Saskatchewan, and the first time I heard that song, I was like, yeah, it's Winnipeg sucks, right? Like, but then, living in Manitoba for, up until now, living in Carmen for like 16 years, 15 years now, that song has a different meaning to me than it did the first time I heard it too. Because there's so many, like I don't think I could ever live in Winnipeg, but I love living within a stone's throw of it to utilize all that it has available,
Right, and
which
then
is
go
which
home.
is a
Yeah,
town. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And then get the heck out of there. Yeah.
Where can people find this EP? I mean, I know it's out now, and I know the way people consume music now. It's you can pretty much find stuff anywhere online. But where would you direct someone if they wanted to hear what you're all about?
I've kind of been pushing it through Spotify, just because that's kind of what I am using these days and that sort of thing. But I had somebody ask me about, where can I download it, and I was like, I don't even like, probably iTunes maybe still. But honestly, if somebody emails me or texts me and says, I'd love to get my hands on the MP3s or the wave files for it, I would send them over in a heartbeat. I just want to share it. I mean, it's never gonna, I mean, I'm looking at the Spotify stuff now and I'm getting like a couple hundred here, a couple hundred there, and I'm just like, it's okay because it's on YouTube and it's on iTunes, and I just find it difficult to track, and that
Yeah,
I'm just not going to stress about what those numbers look like. So I'm like, we're just about sharing it. Then if somebody wants it, they can come at me directly.
cool. And then as far as kind of keeping up with what you're up to, I mean, the good thing about this being a podcast, someone can listen to it the day it comes out, or they can listen to it a year from now, and by then you might have new music out, you might have shows happening. What's the best way to sort of keep up on what you're doing with your music?
I think my Instagram is probably the place where I put the most updates and that sort of thing. So that's usually a pretty safe bet to figure out what's going on.
Cool. And do you have anything planned at the moment as far as shows, kind of to promote this record?
Nothing at the moment, but I think there's some kind of local stuff going on in the area here, and I'm always just kind of chatting with people, and I always find they come up quick or in batches or whatever. So I think there'll be some coming up, but nothing as of yet.
Okay. And is that kind of the idea too? Is just to play locally as much as you can, sort of in your area, or are you hoping to come to Winnipeg and places like that?
Yeah, I'd play Winnipeg. I'd play anywhere. I mean, I think it's kind of a means to kind of go and do things, right? So if somebody says, "Hey, I've got a show here, would you be willing to come?" As long as I can swing it with the family and life in general, I'm there.
Right on.